So I'd like to welcome everyone to our IBS Women's Network members and supporters. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Katie Grund, and I'm the IBS Portfolio Operations Lead based in Chicago. And I'm so excited about our professional development workshop on communicating your value while doing everything else. This is a great timing for us, especially with our year-end self-assessments. Time's ticking on those. They're due November 13th. And first, I want to thank you for taking the time to participate today. During our pandemic times of working virtually, and if you're in the US after a long election season, I'm glad to see that so many members here are willing to spend some time on themselves. That self-care and taking time to just take a step back and focus on your accomplishments and the value that you bring to Mondelēz is so important. And I'm so grateful to the IBS Women's Network leadership team, as well as Javier for investing in our development. It's just great that we were able to get that investment into us as women in our leadership team here. So their sponsorship and dedication to all of the Women's Network really highlights that each of us are important to the success of IBS and to our company, to our teams, and to our communities as well. So I'm so excited about today, and I really have a lot of passion about this topic. When I think back about my development overall, I used to have the mindset of, if I do a good job, then my work's going to speak for itself. But luckily, I had mentors along the way that helped me to improve my confidence at work and really pushed me to articulate what my successes were. And at one of my past employers, I actually had the privilege of participating in a workshop, and I was so energized, and this workshop happened to be led by Darcy Eikenberg. While that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I can still remember clearly some of the key takeaways from that session and how Darcy's coaching style was so relatable, actionable, and really helped me to build my confidence to be my best at work and at home and in other activities that I participate in. So my hope is that this session is the same for you. A few housekeeping items that we have is, one is that, we would have loved for this to be an in-person session, but where we're at today, we had to have a virtual session, but we want to ensure that it's interactive. So we encourage you to answer and participate via the chat, along with, if you follow along, I know we sent out the worksheet prior. So if you don't have this worksheet, you could just put a message in the chat and then Deb could send it along to you. Or if you have that, just follow along, and it's a great reminder to look back at later. And then also, if you're using the chat, there's an option in the chat to chat to all panelists and attendees. If you want to click on that option rather than, I think it defaults to all panelists, then we can ensure that everyone sees your comments and that we could all interact together today. So with that, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Darcy. So like many of us in the working world today, Darcy wears a lot of hats. She's an executive coach to leaders at companies such as the Coca-Cola Company, Microsoft, State Farm, Deloitte, and many more. She consults and speaks on career growth, employee engagement, and then leadership development all over the country. Plus, she's the author of Bring Your Superpowers to Work, Your Guide to More Clarity, Confidence, and Control. And she blogs regularly on leadership and career issues at redcaperevolution.com. So if you haven't had a chance to go to her sites, she's also made a page specifically for us Mondelēz women as well. So we'll share that too. Her ideas have been shared in the Harvard Business Review, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Forbes, among others. And she's a former principal and communications consulting business leader at Hewitt Associates, which is now part of Aon. Darcy brings a sense of humor to serious matters in our work and careers and offers simple, practical ways that we could change our lives at work for the better and for good. So please join me in welcoming Darcy Eikenberg.
Thank you so much, Katie, and I am so glad to be with this group today. And thank you for wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. this is such a great time to dive into this issue. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be here. So as Katie said, Deb Pelham on my team is in the chat. If you didn't get the worksheet, she can email it to you. We're having a little issue on the back end with the page that it's sitting on. So we'll get it to you the old fashioned way by sending it to you. So, but you don't need to have the tools in front of you to be able to participate, enjoy, and really get something for you that matters for you out of today's conversation. So let's get started. Here we are in November. I mean, can you believe it's November? This has been the fastest and slowest year on record ever. Anybody agree with me? But the end of 2020 is in sight. And I don't know, Katie mentioned it, and I don't know if you're like me, this year has felt a little bumpy. I mean, obviously, the things happening in our world are things we've never experienced before and could never have imagined when, you know, we said Happy New Year on New Year's Eve in January. And a lot of people, because of all the change, because of all of the noise that's been in our environment and all of the uncertainty, have just thrown up their hands and have said, you know, hey, what do I do now? How do I move forward? Is this even the time to think about my career? Is this even the time that I can plan on what to do next? Well, I can tell you're not one of those people. You're here. You're here with me right now. You showed up today, and that means so much, because the fact that you're here says that you care about your growth, you care about your development, you care about your company. And I just got to give you credit, because not everybody is doing that right now. And you and I and Katie and Deb and everybody on here and Irene and Janice, and you are not virtual. You're real. You're having real experiences. You need to really keep learning. You know, this is not all fake. We're all interacting in different ways, but we're trying to be ourselves. And that's why I think it's more important than ever that we take a minute and we look at what's really happened in our lives in this past year, and what's really happened in how we've brought value to our companies and to our departments. Because take a hard look right now. I bet there's something on this list that you've done. And my bet is you may have not given yourself credit for it. You might have totally forgotten that you've done this. But if you've done anything on this list, pop it into the chat. Anybody learn something they didn't know before? You know, when you look back at yourself in January and you look at yourself now in November, is there a way that you've grown? Is there a choice you made? Maybe a hard choice. How about relationships? Trying new tools, trying new ways of thinking, helping somebody. If you're somebody who's done that, pop it into the chat, because I know that you are. And I want you to give yourself credit for so many things that you've done that you've probably forgotten about this year. And so take a second and tell us in the chat, if you want to, what's the one thing that you're proud of doing, or maybe you're proud of not doing, choosing not to do in 2020. You are adding more value already than you give yourselves credit for. And today, we're going to talk about how do you communicate that value? How do you really understand that value? And how do you share it with others? You took on challenges, help someone on your team develop and blossom. Those are amazing things. Give yourself a hand. we think that this year was a waste, but really there's so much that happened this year when we take a good, honest look at it. And so that's why I'm so honored that you're here investing in you today. You have a million other things you could be doing, but you spent some time here for you and your colleagues. We mentioned that there's the action plan that Deb will send to you while this particular page is having a little bit of a wonky day. But when we have that page back up, we'll make sure that you know that there's other resources there for you too. But you, with all you've done so far, you're here at the exact right time. And I don't mean the time of the webinar. I mean the time in our world where we're asking these bigger questions. We're asking questions like, how do we speak up more? And how do we get heard? How do we make progress that matters? How do we resist the busyness of business? And how do we execute in ways that have meaning, that make a difference for our company and for others? And we're asking about, how do we take these calculated risks that help us tackle the issues in our companies and in our lives and in our careers? Well, I believe it's time for a revolution. And this isn't a huge revolution. It is our small internal revolutions, one person at a time, one team at a time, one department at a time. It's a revolution in how we understand and communicate the value that we create. And this is why I call my company Red Cape Revolution, because remember when you were a kid and you grabbed a towel or a sheet and you threw it over your shoulders and you felt confident, you felt in control? What if you could feel that way every single day at work? What would change in your life at work then? If you're a leader, what would change in the people around you if they felt more confident, more like they're wearing their red capes, more like they could do no wrong? Well, I believe each of us can, no matter where we come from, no matter where we are in the world, no matter what's going on in the world. And I believe not only we can, we have to, because the world needs us now more than ever. And it especially needs you. So before we get into some strategies, I want to take a second and take a quick look at what's getting in the way. I mean, if the world needs us and we want to shine in the world, right? We want to have a red cape career. What's getting in our way? There are three things that I see that come up in my conversations with my clients, in discussions with teams. Katie even mentioned one when she, in her introduction, things that come up over and over. Maybe one of these is something that's getting in your way too. So here they are. Number one, my work will speak for itself. I just have to keep my head down. I just have to keep focused on what I'm doing. Everybody knows what I do. The work will speak for itself. Whenever I hear this, all my alarms go off. Because here's the truth. You make it look easy. The work you do is so complicated. There's so many pieces to it. But when you let others make the distinctions for you, when you let others decide what is the work you're really doing, you start to become a commodity. Now, what do I mean by a commodity? Well, commodity is something that's just like all the rest. Years ago, a cup of coffee in Denver was the same as a cup of coffee in Detroit. And what happens when you're a commodity? Well, let's look at some of our friends in some of these fine professions. You know, a lot of human resources people have been outsourced to a lowest common denominator, to checklists and structures as opposed to people and conversations. Not everybody, but in each of these professions, people who have not been communicating their value have gotten reduced, have gotten automated, have gotten outsourced. You are not a commodity. But the way you stay out of being a commodity is when you know and communicate your value. Then you can avoid becoming the commodity. Now, the second thing that gets in our way, the second myth, is I'm just fill in the blank with what do you say? You know, how do you describe yourself? What do you call yourself? Just, the word just always flips my switch, because you are so much more than just an analyst, just an information technology leader. There's so much more behind you, and you have unique and special superpowers that you are bringing to work. And often they may not be something that's on your job description. They may be in how you do the work and the way that you do the work that matters. Because the best way to move out of being a commodity right now is to do the work that matters. What matters, you might wonder? Well, here's the things that really matter in today's workplaces. And I mean workplaces, physical, remote, you know, the environment of our work. These are the things that matter, because they're the things that have mattered and motivated human beings for millions of years. Things like connection, community, meaning, interpretation, inspiration, and dare I say it, even that 4-letter word in our workplaces, love. We've seen a lot more of love and care and connection that has been opened up to us in this crazy time that we've had. And the truth is, this is where you make a difference. This is where you get noticed. This is what becomes a differentiator, when you are making your work in ways that matter to other human beings. And when we know and communicate our value, when we know that we make meaning, when we know that we create connection, we do more of the work that matters and less of that doesn't. And we're going to get a chance to go more deeply into that and answer your questions about that, because I know that's an area a lot of us wonder about. A lot of us, you know, worry about how we're coming across and what really our superpowers are. But the third myth is, I don't have time. I've got so much going on. How can we possibly get all this stuff done? Yeah, as you would expect, this also drives me crazy, because overwhelm isn't really about time. Having too much to do isn't really about the things. It is about choices. It's about making decisions. It's about knowing the priorities for our time. We all have the same amount of time. If you feel like you're not communicating your value because you don't have enough time, it's time to look hard at where you are spending your time, to say, where's the different choices that you can make? Because when we know and communicate our value, we can create more time. When we're doing things that are more in our superpower space and less of the work that's not, we have more time to make more of a difference, to make more meaning, to make more of what matters for our teams, our companies, and our own careers. So let me ask you, let's go back to the chat. Of those 3 myths, which of those do you default to? Or maybe if you don't want to fess up for yourself, maybe which of the ones do you hear other people talking about? You know, are you defaulting to, I don't have time, or defaulting to, well, the work will speak for itself? So Yeah, number one, constantly. Time, yeah, absolutely. Um, all of these are myths that we have to get over in order to communicate our value more actively. Yeah, I hear us talk about it all the time. You know, one of the things that is a really unique moment that we have right now, it's almost an invitation for us that change, major change, is a window of opportunity. And you get to choose a different thought. You get to try different things. You get to ask for different behaviors. And all of these can help you both define for yourself what your value is, and more importantly, help others see the value that you're bringing. So we're going to get into that in the strategies today. So I just want to stop a second before we dive into the strategies that I want to share with you, and just check in on any questions, and also just let me just take a look at the chat, and have a sip of water. So yeah, a lot of you, the work will speak for itself. That's kind of how we were taught, right? And especially during a time of change. I know a lot of my clients come to me saying, well, the thing that I was taught was keep your head down and just keep, plugging along and don't make waves, which is exactly the opposite of how we get noticed, how we communicate our value, how we get connected. So, okay, let's move forward. But as we go along, if you have questions, thoughts come up, comments, please pop them in the chat. Okay. So there are 3 strategies I want to share with you today that help you communicate your value. Here they are. First, get clear on your superpowers. Now, what do I mean by superpowers? You've heard me use this term a couple times, and people sometimes think, well, if we're talking about superpowers, we're just talking about strengths. We're just talking about what I know how to do, what I do best. Well, the truth is that you have so much more in your skill set beyond what you take credit for. The way you do things, the mode, the attitude, the resources you use, you do things in a way that is unique to you. And what makes you great is probably not something on your job description. The fact that you care so deeply about your team or your customers or your internal clients, is that written on your job description? I've yet to see a job description that, except in maybe in healthcare, that talks about words like care, love, making a difference, making an impact. What is it for you that stands out? What are the unique things that you bring to your work? And then as we think about those unique qualities, those unique characteristics, we need to level them up and say, so when I do that, how does that save us money, make us money, save us time, or save us energy? Overall, those are the 4 things that any business tends to value, and things your leaders tend to value. But we don't always make the connection between the choices we make about how we do things and how we're unique and the way that we uniquely do things and how it connects to one of those important measures. So there's a tool I want to share with you. And we also have this in the action sheet. So if you don't have the action sheet, again, ping Deb Pelham on my team and she can email it to you. And this is something you don't need to do now, you can do later, but we'll go through it just real time. And this is a way to help you really understand your superpowers and how you can think about the difference that you make, how what you do really matters. It's what I call your who and do what statement. Now, just to say it, this is not an elevator speech. I'm not a big fan of elevator speeches. I don't want to talk in an elevator. And even if I was in an elevator, I'd probably be wearing a mask today. And so that would be kind of muddled, right? So, but the who and do what statement is a great exercise to help you get clear about what you do for whom that makes what difference. So here's the model, and then I'm going to give you an example of it. So and then it's an action. What's the action that you take? That action that's in your superpower space. The action where you feel like you're wearing your red cape. So putting that action in there. And then with or for a people or process or thing. So who's it for? Or what's it for? And then here's the important part of the statement. So that, and that ties to the bigger result that you make happen. And that bigger result is probably tied to making money, saving time, saving energy. So let's look at an example of this. And maybe some of you brave ones want to try to practice your own in the chat. Again, we're all friends here. There's no right or wrong. It's all an experiment. So if you want to try yours, go right ahead and share it, or write it down on your worksheet or just somewhere else, as these thoughts might inspire some thoughts for yourself. So here's how this works. Often someone will just say something like, oh, I'm an analyst in the XYZ department. They'll plug themselves into a role. Instead of the who and do what statement gives you the information and gives you some words to talk about yourself at a higher level of value. So in this case, I lead the data collection process, that's the action, for the $5 million department, that's people, so that our team members have the information they need to do their jobs and help our customers. That's a bigger result. So as you are looking at the ways that you're talking about what you do, the ways you're thinking about what you do, how can you level it up and think about what's the action, what's the real action that you do? Not the role, but the action. Who do you do it for? Who are the people? Maybe it's a department, maybe it's a customer, maybe it's something else. And then, so what? What's the bigger result? So tell us in the chat if this resonates with you and if this is something you want to experiment with. And, there's no perfect answer here. So many of us do multiple things. But thinking about, how do I want to be known for? When do I feel like I'm wearing my red cape? What is the difference that I make? If I were gone, where would the whole be? Think about these things and challenge yourself to try out the who and do what statement. Okay. Here is the second strategy. And this strategy might surprise some people because it is master the art of bragging. Okay, hands up if you were taught that it is not okay to brag. Tell us in the chat, give us an emoji, tell us a yes. If you were somebody that was told it is not okay to brag. Yep. Me, yep. Yeah, me too. And yet, here's the truth. This idea of bragging totally throws us off because we've been programmed, we've been trained that brag is a 4-letter word. And we've been taught that, bragging means that I'm trying to be better than somebody, that I'm trying to be over the top of somebody, that I'm trying to show myself off. But I want to offer a different perspective for you. What if your story about where you are proud, the story about what you have done, the story about how you've made a difference can help somebody else? Would you hold that back? Would you keep it to yourself? If your story, the things where you are proud, the things that you've learned, the places you've grown, could be of value to someone, then why hide it? So we're going to actually go through a formula about how to brag in ways that others won't gag. So, and it all starts with finding your point of pride. So I want you to actually do this. I want you to think about your past year. You maybe already were thinking about it up, earlier in the presentation when we looked back at some of the things you have done, and maybe some of the things you forgot that you've done or didn't give yourself credit for adapting, for changing, for learning. And find a point of pride in that. It doesn't have to be something that anybody else would have noticed. It has to be something that you are proud of, that you did, that you chose. And as you look at that point of pride, think about, is that something that's in my superpower space? Like if I kept the team moving forward and calm, is that something I want to be known for? Is that something that, yes, I'm proud to have that characteristic? That's me at my very best. That's me soaring with my red cape. Find that point of pride that's in your superpower space. Now, here's the secret sauce that changes your brag into something that is going to serve other people. And so since it's going to serve, we need to be doing it more often. And that's to add emotion. Because here's the truth, here's the secret. Emotion puts people in motion. Positive emotion draws people forward. And as you probably know, negative emotion pulls people back. But when we have emotion, we show emotion around these things that we are truly proud of, that we are excited by. We get to tell our stories in ways that don't feel like we're being full of ourselves, ways that feel like we are sharing an experience with somebody else, an experience that can help them and that they can learn more about how we can help them too. So listen to the difference here. So I'm going to offer two different statements. So one is, I was named to the CEO's task force. Okay, sounds all right. But what if I say, I was so honored to be named to the CEO's task force? The emotion in there makes those totally different comments. When you are putting your own emotion into your pride point, into the things you're doing, into the things you're accomplishing, what it ends up doing is pulling people toward you, as opposed to the thing we're all afraid of and that we were taught that, that was arrogant and full of ourselves, where we're just putting a lot of data out there and, we're expecting people to go, oh, that's wonderful. But when it's our emotion, it's true. As Dizzy Dean, the old baseball player, said, it ain't bragging if it's true. So what's true about you? I want to challenge you, because this is a new muscle for many of us to build. I want to challenge you to maybe in the chat right now or write something down. What is something in the last 9 months that is in your superpower space that you are proud of, that you are excited to do, that you appreciated? What is something that gives you your little brag bite? And the way that, as you're putting things in the chat, the way we use these is in all the little white space in our work life, right? I mean, I'm not talking about going around in every meeting saying, I was so proud to be invited here. I was so honored that we did this on time and on budget. No. But it's a way to insert in the white space, in the chit chat time as the Zoom meeting's coming on, in the, hey, how are you? where you usually would say fine, instead of saying fine, to say, great, I was so honored that we got the annual report done on time and on budget. How about for you? What's new with you? Suddenly you have what we old people call a conversation. This type of bragging allows you to drop evidence of the things you want to be known for, to share more often the types of things that you want to plant those seeds in other people's mind about what you really do, about how you really matter, about what's really the difference that you make. When we just lose the opportunities for the white space and we just say, fine, how are you? Fine. How are you? Another day, another dollar. You know, when we do that, we don't get the chance to communicate what truly we're doing, where we're excited, where things are going well. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I am hearing right now from my clients, especially as senior leaders that are my clients, is that they are hungry for pulling out the stories where things are going well. And as I mentioned before, there is actually a neurological bias that people lean toward the positive. They want the positive, and the negative people pull back. It doesn't mean that if things aren't great with you, you shouldn't share them. But it means that strategically, if you want someone to know the value you're bringing, you are better off in creating the positive energy around it. And many of you, as Katie mentioned, we first met in an actual physical presentation. And I often do this exercise in groups. And I'll often ask people beforehand, you know, who thinks that nobody wants to hear them brag? And practically everybody says, I don't want to, no one wants to hear me brag. And then afterward, after we do some little rapid exercises in small groups, most everyone wanted to hear more from their partner who was, quote unquote, bragging to them. Why? Because they were excited by it. They were intrigued by it. It's like, oh, tell me more about that process you changed. Tell me more about the difficult conversations that you had. Tell me more about the Leaders of the Future program. Yeah, I mean, this is a way to pull people in, way to also redefine how you're known. Because if you don't do it, you become the commodity. If you let others define you, oh, she's just the IT person, as opposed to she's the problem solver, she's the troubleshooter, she's the people whisperer. What's that thing for you? Are you talking about it enough in a way that others can see it and feel it too? Yeah, helps also with end of year conversations. I know that Katie had mentioned you all are, thank you, Astrid. Katie had mentioned you all are in the process of annual reviews, and that's probably self-assessments. These words, I call these smoothers, can help you both in spoken word, but also in written word. So if you want to take a screenshot, go right ahead. That by being able to tell your story in ways that just don't feel so flat. It was great when amid the pandemic, I accomplished getting the project plans and the project teams up and running in half the time that we expected. Saves time, saves money, makes money, saves energy. It all connects to that. Any questions for that? Katie, I think we'll take we'll turn Katie's mic back on, and for you all too. What's one thing that right now you guys can brag on? Put it in the chat. But Katie, let's take a second and see what questions there might be out there. I was trying to make sure I could put your video back on.
Sure.
There, are you there?
Yep, here I am.
Okay.
Oh, can you see my video? There we
Yep,
go.
I can see you. Can see you now.
Great. So we have a lot of great accomplishments. Just to go through a few of those that, so proud to successfully train the end users and all of them passing the LTO. I'm proud to be a part of the global SSMT and ensure the safety and security of our colleagues. Proud to be nominated to join the Leaders of the Future program, and many others here too. Proud to lead the most critical AR process improvement initiative of the function. So it was great to see so many wonderful accomplishments. But, Darcy, in our time of being more virtual, do you have any strategies for communicating this, not just on our year-end reviews, but just how we reach out and communicate our value in more of a virtual world?
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes back to that idea of white space, and whether it's white space in the beginning of a meeting or whether it's actually creating your own white space. This is something I've been working with a lot of leaders on, that when we're missing some of the traditional physical interactions, we have to make an effort to reach out to people and to check in. And whether you're a leader or not, I think that it is absolutely fine if you're curious about somebody, or somebody is in the middle of something and you just like to check in. I think it is perfectly fine to to invite them to have a 15-minute chat. Hey Bob, I miss seeing you around the office. I love to catch up with you. Do you have 15 minutes for a phone call sometime in the next week? Or here's my calendar, or I'll have my assistant book some time on our calendars, whatever your mode might be. And to set it up intentionally, because I think a lot of times if we just do drop in or, just do chat, people aren't in the mindset of, hey, this is just a catch up. This is just a relaxed situation. But having those places where you intentionally reach out to somebody and you're, of course, asking about them, then they're going to naturally ask about you. And then you're able to tell some of these stories. Like, thank you for asking. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that, we went from X to Y and now we're at Z. And I feel great about that. And someone's going to say, yeah, that's terrific. Oh, I didn't even know that you did X and Y. Tell me more about that. So it's giving people the definition, feeding people what you want them to know about you. Often people put you in a box because that's just how the brain works. The brain wants simplicity. The brain wants to just think, oh, the IT person I see here is the same as the one that I've always seen. If you want to change your brand, if you want to explain to people how you add value, reach out and ask about them. And in that situation, you'll get a chance to tell them more about you. So that's a good way to start.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also just not, in addition to, communicating our value, it's also just building the community that we miss so much about being able to walk up to people and ask them in person. I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah. This also goes back to one of those things that matter, right? How do you stand out as a leader? How do you stand out as a team member? That the fact is, right now, connection and care and meaning are more important than ever. And it will probably never show up on a performance review. But the truth is that when people feel positive toward you, they feel good about you, they might not be able to articulate it, but that builds trust, and that builds the environment where they're going to actually lean toward, looking at what you do more positively. They may not be able to articulate and say, it's because I know that Katie cares about me, that she asks about me, that she trusts me, and all of those things that we so often think are intangible are so much more tangible than ever. And I think are something I hope that, even whenever we transition into physical workplaces again, that we keep, because it is that human connection. We don't work for companies, we work with humans. Companies are people. And the more we can realize how do people make decisions and move forward, the better we are at communicating our value and getting the things that we need for ourselves and making the difference we want to make.
Thanks, Darcy.
Yeah,
And I see
great.
another question come through. Any tips on if you're still feeling a bit British and like you are boasting when doing these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's the mindset I would offer you. Somebody out there needs me. Somebody out there needs to know that I am their answer to be able to do these things. Somebody, if I keep it to myself, that's actually kind of selfish. Like I know how to solve certain problems. I know how to do what I'm doing. If I am not sharing that with people, then they can't add it to their formula. They can't add it to what they're doing. And, we can't make whatever bigger results we're going to make. So when you feel cautious, when you pull back, um, realize that somebody needs to know that there's somebody like you who does the things that you do, who is proud of the way that she's done things. I often think about our time right now in COVID. If you were sitting on the molecule that, if combined with somebody else's molecule, would make the cure, who are you to sit on that molecule? Put it out there, try it. You have something to share. But thank you for that question.
Yeah, and I think that also it just shows just how passionate you are about your job and about your leadership as well.
Right. Yeah. So
there's one more question. How do I make sure my value is rewarded appropriately?
So obviously, rewards are tricky right now in terms of where a company is, what their policies are, what financially you're going on for. So I think the question is, have you articulated and got clear for yourself what you believe your value is worth, and whether that's in the marketplace, whether that's in your company. And this goes to tying it to what those business results are. How does your work save money, make money, save energy, and finishing that story for somebody else. When you can finish that story for somebody else and you can show that distinction, then you can make the ask for how you believe that needs to be rewarded. And it tends to be then not about you. It tends to be about the result. So it tends to be about, if we didn't have this value, what's the risk factor? What would not happen? And oftentimes we don't often see all of the places that we make a difference. And so doing that work, and sometimes this is great to grab a friend. If you're so close to it and you're like, I just don't see how anything that I'm doing makes a connection to anything that matters, walk through it with a friend. Just keep challenging. It's like, so what? You do this, and then so what happens? That's some way to get to it, so that you can have conversations where you can ask for what you believe you deserve. And today rewards can be a number of things too. It can not only can be money, but it could be time, it could be freedom, flexibility. So think about what you want when you're talking about, how do I make sure my value is rewarded appropriately? So these are all great questions, and I know we want to we're going to also have the opportunity to ask more questions there. When we later today, we'll let Katie know that the site is back up. There's a place to ask questions for our follow-up Q&A that's going to be in December. So I'm going to move forward, but keep asking your questions. Whatever we don't get to here, we'll also make sure we get answered in another way. So I want to give you the third strategy. It's to stop doing the busy work. Sometimes this is what gets in the way of our value, because just because you can doesn't mean you should. Oftentimes, especially as women, we do the corporate housekeeping. We're the ones that, we'll arrange the party, or we'll send out the notes, or we'll do all these other loose end things. But if it's not your job, this is what we have amazing administrative professionals for, right? For a lot of those things. But often we see a senior person, or a person with a particular expertise taking on all these things just because, there's no one else to do it, or I just want to be a team player. All it does is diffuse how people see you, and confuses how people see you into thinking that you are in that box as opposed to in the box of higher value that you're in. So this is a perfect time for what I call the red cape reset. And we can hit the reset button on many different things. So it might be time for you to hit the reset button on your relationships. Maybe time to have that conversation to improve, strengthen, deepen a relationship. Or maybe a process or a deliverable or expectations. And here's the magic words as to how to get it started. Remember I said earlier, change is a window of opportunity. So right now, if there's something you want to reset the expectations about how you're rewarded. You can say, talk to the person that is involved in it. It may not be your boss, it may be somebody else. You say something like, all of this change has made me really think about X, the thing that you want to reset. And so I'd like to talk about moving from X to Y, to a process that doesn't take as much time, or to a relationship where we talk more often, or we don't talk as much. So you have the opportunity to, if you're doing busy work now, to stop doing some of that busy work and to renegotiate some of that busy work. I have a client right now that has been responsible for a weekly collection of data that she takes a lot of time to pull into PowerPoint and to kind of look through. And it is not in her superpower space. It exhausts her. It does take a lot of time. And so I asked her, does anybody look at the report? And she couldn't answer that. And so she actually decided to stop doing it for a couple weeks. And you know what? Nobody asked where it was. So there's a lot of things in our environment that grow up like that, that we assume that our expectations are it should be done. But does it need to? When you communicate your value, we can teach people how to treat us. We can teach people by not taking on the things that are outside our superpower space, by not taking on the things that are beyond the core value that we bring. And having the clarity around this really helps us have more time, more focus. When we don't do the busy work, we end up getting to do more of the work that matters. So you might think about one thing you could reset right now. Maybe it's an expectation or a boundary. Maybe it's something else. So we just did some questions. Katie, I'll just jump back to you for any other questions. And before I have one little short story to wrap it up.
Yeah, and I'd encourage our participants to share, what is something that you would like to reset? Because that might, by sharing that, somebody else might get that idea of something that they can do as well.
Yeah, expectations of others. I'm seeing a lot of people reset things around meetings because this environment, screen out. Do I have to be on screen all the time? Are there some times when, especially between one or two people, the phone call works just as fine, or have the agreement that we're not on camera, it's just, we're just online.
So Darcy, do you have some suggestions then? We talked about before, the cake cutter at the celebration. Some people always default to that, or the note taker. How do we get out of that habit?
Yeah. So first, you decide on yourself that you don't say yes. Like when everybody's looking around, nature abhors a vacuum, and a lot of times as women, we'll step in to fill that vacuum. But it's okay to make it uncomfortable. And if someone says, "Oh, well, Katie, you've done that in the past. I don't have capacity right now," and just don't even give any other explanation. And let it be. Because if no one steps up, then why are you doing that thing in the first place? I think a lot of times we step into things thinking we should, but then what it does is it devalues us. I mean, and there are times too, we're doing things that do we need to do? Do we need to take notes anymore when we all have one of these and we could record the whole thing? So thinking about any of those things, if you look at your list of to-dos and any of those things that are busy work that you should drop. And sometimes you just need to stop doing it and not even tell anybody and see if anybody cares. So those are some strategies you can use.
Thanks.
So let's just do one quick story before we wrap up. And, and really, I hope that you take one action away from this, and something you will either do today, in the next week. But I hope something here has resonated with you. And we are going to be back together in December, and this page will be working later today, but you can have the place that we have a bunch of other resources, plus you can submit your confidential questions. It's redcaperevolution.com/MDLZ. So, and as you're thinking about these things, and as you're trying these behaviors on, there's a story that Jeff Bezos told. And in case you've been off planet, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, and he had a friend who wanted to do the perfect freestanding headstand. And she really just thought it'd be easy. She was in good shape. She went to the gym. She just thought she'd try it for a while. She watched some videos on YouTube. Hey, it sounds easy. Well, it wasn't easy. She tried and tried, and she was about ready to give up. And then someone said this to her, which I think is something for us to keep in mind as you think about communicating your value. If you think you're going to figure it out quickly, then you'll just end up quitting. Just because at the end of this conversation that we're having, it's not all perfectly crystal clear in your mind, don't not try it. Don't not experiment with it. Don't not take a baby step to ask the next question. Because for a lot of us, we weren't trained to communicate our value. We weren't trained to talk about ourselves. We weren't trained to be proud of the work that we're doing. But we need you in the world of work. We don't want you to wait. Somebody out there needs you. We need you more than ever. So we'll open up for some more questions, but I just really thank you all today for being here. I thank Katie and the whole Mondelēz leadership team for inviting me to share some ideas with you.
Thanks, Darcy. We so appreciate you being here as well. I know I have a lot of takeaways, and for the participants, if you'd like to, I invite you to add into the chat kind of the biggest thing that you took away from this presentation and this workshop, so we can, all value that as well. As Darcy said, we're going to have another session December 8th at 8 a.m. Central Time. So that's going to be a Q&A session. So as you've gone through kind of some of these action items, if you have more questions, once we have the Mondelēz site under Red Cape Revolution and you go to that site, there's so many good resources on that site. And I'm sure they're going to have a lot of discussion points as you go through them. But I'd really like to put this in action and say, how do we move this forward and continue this with our women's network as well? So I invite you to join our session on December 8th. And in the meantime, feel free to reach out to each other and to me so we could continue to show our value.
Yeah, if you have
Thanks,
a question
everyone.
right now, while the page is being wonky, go ahead and email that to my assistant, deb@redcaperevolution.com. So if you're something on your mind right now, you don't want to lose it, go ahead and email that to her or put it in the chat, and we'll have the questions from the chat too. But really appreciate you all being here today from all over the world. Thank you, Mondelēz. And we'll look forward to seeing you in December soon.